Hello, team, and welcome to an ATP geopolitics video. Another one with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. This is a Ukraine War update extra video in the extra tidbits and nuggets to get your teeth into to give you a greater understanding of the war in Ukraine. So much is going on at the moment, so much to talk about as ever. Uh, I'll go first to a little update of what's going on the front line, just a little soupçon of understanding there. Latest is that there are reports of an ongoing counterattack on the outskirts of Robert Turner. Battles are raging there. This is a place, so if we go to the Zaporizhia front line, we have the east and then this southern front line. And between the reservoir and Velika Novosilka here, and then onto Vuhledar, we have quite an active front line, but particularly around Orikhiv. So around Orikhiv, we know there's been activity around Lobkova, and then if we zoom in a little bit more, I've been thinking there's been activity around Myrna. There is another Myrna on the front line just up the road, which is typical for Ukraine, just to confuse us. But around Nestoryanka, around Kopani, and then over towards this way, towards Novopokrovka. But actually here, Robert Turner, they've done some reconnaissance in force activities there a month or so ago. The Ukrainians now they are attacking there again. So that's where the activity is, just to the south of Orikhiv. And it does appear like they are just probing everywhere to find where they can exploit weaknesses. Now, at the same time, the nighttime action in Zaporizhia, says this source. Zaporizhia front is claimed to have taken place exactly where Pasi Poroinen made his analysis of the Russian defenses. Now, I shared this analysis with you and we went through it. I'd say it's a coincidence, but it's not. He's just good at his job. This was looking at all the defensive, all the defenses made up along the Zaporizhia front line, and we went through a bunch of that. I'm pretty sure it was this guy that we checked out. So all of that kind of analysis, you can bet your bottom dollar that the Ukrainians would have done that. Their military would have done that. This is just open source intelligence, right? So they would know exactly where these defenses are, and they will be negotiating the best route through them. So that is taking place at the moment. So a lot of activity along that southern area. Right, on to the next thing here. This was the Russian conventional armed forces chap who was captured by Wagner. And then he had to admit on this video that he was given a bit of a roughing up, and he had to admit that he had attacked the Wagner troops, had bombed them, set his artillery on them, and then also disarmed a unit of them as well. And he admitted that on camera. He's now been released back, and he's saying, well, this is what he says. So, commander of the Russian 72nd Brigade, Ronan Venevitin, who was previously captured and interrogated by Wagner, was released and recorded the following statement. Venevitin says Wagner is known for numerous cases of kidnapping Russian soldiers, threatening them with shooting, humiliating, torturing them, and driving to suicide. Venevitin refutes all claims made by Wagner, including those related to claimed mining of Wagner's rear positions in Bakhmut, despite having some bright patches in collective work. This footage indicates a deep rift of mistrust and hatred between regular Russian army and Wagner PMC. So the fact that he's denying what he previously had to admit to tells us nothing about whether the Russian conventional forces were trying to sabotage Wagner. Who knows? What we do know is they both hate each other, and that's great for the Ukrainians. Sit back and eat the popcorn. There is that resentment between them where either this guy was forced to admit something that was heinous or he did something that was heinous. And neither look is good for the Russians. Um, so anyway, it might be worth looking into that in some more depth. That's a 7-minute video, so there's a lot to be said in there. I'll check that out at a later time just to see if there's some more information we can glean from that. Right, the next subject I want to talk about is JDAMs. What are JDAMs, and how are they suffering? How are the Ukrainians suffering in their usage of them? They have been apparently jammed quite a lot. There's a lot of excitement about their, Ukraine being given them by the United States, and that we haven't really heard a lot of news about them. I did report this morning that there could have been usage of them along the front line with some explosions that looked rather JDAM-ish. But actually, it appears that the Russians may have been able to jam them quite significantly. So, what is a JDAM? JDAM's name is, to an extent, a misnomer. So, that is a joint direct attack munition. It's not a weapon per se. Instead, the term covers a panoply of kits outfitting an array of dumb bombs. These kits equip the mid and tail section of an unguided bomb and contain a GPS and an inertial guidance system (INS). The INS, which does not depend on GPS PNT signals, also helps the weapon's precision. Today, 15 different JDAM kits are in service, equipping a range of bombs weighing from £500, that's 225 kilograms, to £2,000, that's 900 kilograms. So as you can see there, you get a guidance system. They put different nose and end, I think, on the bombs, and then kit them out, I think, possibly with fins as well. And they are precise and also can carry quite a punch. The basic concept of operations for JDAM is for the guidance kit to be loaded with the target's coordinates, most probably latitude and longitude. These coordinates are either transferred from the aircraft or loaded before the sortie. Target coordinates can also be updated during the mission. The weapon is released, and the tail unit continually receives signals from the GPS constellation on the bomb's position relative to the target. The bomb's trajectory is continually adjusted by the fins on the tail unit as it heads towards the target, based on the PNT information it is receiving and the data provided by the INS. Publicly available figures indicate that JDAM guidance kits can hit within 5 meters, 16 feet of a target or less. So that's a CEP, if you like, of 5 meters. Should the GPS signal be unavailable, the INS can steer the bomb to within 30 meters or 98 feet of the target. Right. So what's been happening? Well, Russians have been doing counter GPS tactics. So this is information that has been released from the documents, the classified documents that came out as a result of Jack Teixeira. I believe so. The documents articulated US concerns that Russian jamming was causing some JDAM ER, that's extended range, so ones that can go just a little bit further, munitions to miss their targets. It is no secret that Russian land forces have deployed scores of electronic warfare systems into the Ukrainian theatre of operations. Some of these are specifically designed to jam GPS transmissions. The Russian Army's R330ZH JTEL system, deployed at the tactical level, being a notable example. The R330ZH detects and attacks radio signals across wavebands from 100 megahertz to 2 gigahertz. Open sources say that the system can transmit jamming signals with 10 kilowatts of power. Signals from the US GPS satellites with which JDAM kits are transmitted on wavebands from 1.164 gigahertz to 1.575 gigahertz. These fall squarely within the R330ZH's catchment area. Official documents seen by the authors state that the system has a jamming range of up to 30 kilometers or 18.6 miles. So up and down, if you get a set of these jammers up and down the front line, you can protect most of the front line probably. I don't know how many of these systems they have, but you can protect large amounts of the front line with these jamming implements. So there's a lot more talk about the geekery of it here, but essentially GPS signals are very weak by the time they've traveled from the satellite, from Earth to satellite to back to Earth, 10,900 nautical miles from the satellite to Earth, and the radio strength is typically measured in decibels per milliwatt. But I won't go into the details there. They're pretty weak, so that would imply that they're quite easy to jam. So the US has made strenuous efforts to mitigate the jamming risk to JDAM. So they have adapted them, something called the M-code GPS. But despite the steps the US has taken to safeguard JDAM's resilience to global navigation satellite system jamming, GNSS jamming, it may still be vulnerable. One senior electronic warfare expert told the author that even with SASSM, the sheer brute force of a powerful jamming signal can prevent the JDAM's GNSS receiver. So the SASSM is a selective availability anti-spoofing module. So it's protecting the JDAM bomb from being jammed. But the brute force of the jamming signal can prevent the JDAM's GNSS receiver from obtaining the encrypted signal. Steps can be taken to try to nullify any jamming. The exact capabilities of the JDAM's GNSS systems are understandably classified. Counter EW, counter electronic warfare provisions may include the system recognizing a jamming signal and its direction. The receiver may then be able to block out signals coming from that direction while continuing to receive GNSS signals from unaffected areas. The GNSS receiver will typically need to see, that is, have an uninterrupted line of sight with at least 4 satellites. Often, a GNSS receiver has more satellites than this within range. Thus, blocking off the direction of the jamming signals will not necessarily deprive the receiver of being able to see other satellites. However, it is possible that Russian forces may choose to protect potential JDAM targets with multiple jammers, enabling signals to hit the GNSS receiver from 2 or more directions. This could deprive the receiver of the line of sight range to unjammed GNSS signals. Above all, the problem may well be the sheer power of the jamming signal that can be brought to bear, as shown by the R330ZH. One problem for the Russians is that a powerful jamming signal may be comparatively easy for Ukrainian electronic warfare experts to detect. So the bomb comes in, you're going to have a signal blocking it, but then if it's blocking from only one direction, the GPS system can still detect, or GNSS system can still detect other satellites. So you need to jam them from multiple directions, or such a powerful jamming signal can just, wipe it out. So, but those jamming, you know, the jamming itself sends up a signal that Ukrainians can then detect, and then you hit the electronic warfare piece of equipment. So every day when I talk about pieces of special equipment getting taken out, if a large proportion of those are electronic warfare jamming installations or whatever, then that's really significant. So is it a fluke then? Is it a coincidence that we're now seeing possibly some more JDAM footage as these systems have been knocked out? Well, we'll come on to that in a second. So once the jamming signal is detected and identified as such, the jammer's latitude and longitude could then be determined. These coordinates could be passed on to artillery and engaged with kinetic fires. This tactic may help to explain some of Russia's electronic warfare equipment losses. Right, then remember this video that I showed you today, and I gave you the preamble to it, so this is important. Operators of the main intelligence directorate of the MOD of Ukraine destroy Russian equipment with Polish warmate loitering munitions. 2 Pantsir S-1 air defense systems, R330 JDAM electronic warfare jamming communication station, Podler S-band radar, and 3 Cluster 2E2 radars were destroyed. So that's at least one piece of electronic warfare jamming equipment taken out here. I knew there was going to be music, and I was just hoping there wasn't. There was. So I don't know which one we might be able to work it out, but it could be that one. Who knows? Anyway, one of these is a JDAM, the 330ZH, and that is taken out. So this is a montage of a lot of really important equipment that has been taken out. You would hope, and they're not going to be the most well protected with armor, so they'll be susceptible. Even if the drone slightly misses, there could be significant enough damage to cause them problems. So as the article continues, another problem is that transmitting a huge amount of jamming power across the frequencies used by PNT signals has the potential to jam any other radio traffic weaker than the jamming signal. This can include friendly receivers like satellite communication terminals and GNSS systems. We heard earlier on in the war that there were claims from Russians that they were having their own signals jammed by their own pieces of kit. These risk being jammed by friendly signals. Evidence from Ukraine suggests that the Russian army regularly suffers electromagnetic fratricide to this end. So what I was saying there, the force often exhibits scant concern for jamming friendly signals when attacking its enemies. So it's more important for us that we take out, and there might be some decent rationale in that. It's not to say that's a bad idea, but it's more important we take out their stuff than our guys get to do what they want to do. Is the rationale there. So what now? Although Russia's GNS jamming activities may not be cost-free from an electromagnetic fratricide and hard kill vulnerability perspective, the leaked US documents show that it is having an impact. Jamming is not causing the JDAMs to stop working, as in you can still release the bombs and they still fall, it doesn't overcome physics. The bombs aren't just floating around the atmosphere somewhere, so they do fall down. It's just that it'll affect their accuracy. So it's risking their accuracy, arguably a key selling point of the weapon. This is a potential problem when comparatively small targets are being engaged. US GNSS engineers may have to rethink how they safeguard JDAMs for the wars of tomorrow based on the conflicts of today. And there's so many people will be learning so much about this war in terms of all sorts of things. Right. This is just a 30-second aside. Dear Japan, if 100 guys with small arms can easily invade Belgorod, and until today the Russian army hasn't been able to repel them, I believe you can take the Kuril Islands back and liberate them from Russian occupation. You will never have a better opportunity like this again. I've talked about this in terms of Georgia, Chechnya, all sorts of places that might Armenia, Azerbaijan might go, yeah, now's the time to be pretty opportunistic. Well, actually, Japan, who are fighting or unhappy over the situation in Kuril Islands that Russia has helped themselves to, and they've also placed stuff on the Kuril Islands, like equipment, military equipment. Now's a good time to go and help yourself to them, and but maybe not. That might start World War III. Right, on to the Dan, Novikakhovka Dan. Leah Kroll, a very valued member. Thank you, Leah. You are awesome. The breach of the dam is terrible. I mean, I completely agree with everything she says here. I think this is still very underrated in the news. It is basically massively underreported. The dam is such a terrible thing that it should be the front and center of the news all of the time at the moment. Last few days should have been the number one thing, and the international community should have absolutely come down on Russia. Apart from, but what happened? The UN had National Russian Language Day. Didn't even mention this, but then celebrated the Russian language. What? Anyway, apart from all the direct suffering, the Ukrainian agriculture and horticulture is severely affected economically. Russia is destroying Ukraine economically. I'm not sure about the nuclear power plant. There is no danger in the short term, but suppose you now get a dry summer, all new cooling risks. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has put the security of Ukraine and the rest of Europe at risk in a nasty way. On the escalation ladder, this damn action, to me, is equivalent to using a tactical nuclear weapon. Right, two things. Firstly, go and watch Purin's video on escalation. It's brilliant. Second of all, I totally agree here. Right, imagine if Russia had used a tactical nuke now. Imagine what NATO would have done. Would absolutely destroyed Russia and their military capability. Would have absolutely hammered them. And Russia know that. What they've done here is they've done something that not only is, I think, worse than a tactical nuke, that takes a couple of kilometers of damage and radiates a certain area. I mean, it's horrible, but this is worse, right? This could absolutely majorly affect international global food production, supply, and could cause, further problems for famine, so on and so forth. You could have, not only has this been an ecological disaster such as radiation would, I mean, the water we've got oil in the water as well. We've got there is so much destruction coming from this, from an area of to an area of land that is far greater than the tactical nuke. And you've now got the potential of a nuclear power plant going up. So this, my opinion is that NATO should have this should have been a red line. That's how bad, and that's why I'm concentrating on the dam quite a lot at the moment, because it is bloody important, and it's an absolute shocker. Anyway, as you can see here, the devastation is massive. This is an absolute travesty, human and ecological travesty. Just a phenomenal amount of land, 600 square kilometers. I imagine even more now. Affected, and all the stuff that revolves depends on that land affected as well. So you might say, well, that the immediate area here is probably affected. But if you're talking about the entire plains of Zaporizhia getting fed by the water of the reservoir, then that damage is greater. Now, I do want to. I'd be interested in your opinion on this, or what you can tell me, because I don't know whether I'm right in thinking the canals will be that affected. So you've got the four canals that I talked about yesterday that blowing up the dam could, like, let's assume those canals then stop functioning, and that completely stops water irrigation into the whole area, and crops all destroyed, and you get eventually a dust bowl after a couple of years or whatever. Right, that's your worst case scenario. Blowing up what the dam did is it stored a bunch of water over time and then releases it. But you've got a water flow that's continuous. That water flow is dependent on, yeah, you've got a big tank of water in the reservoir, but you've basically got a constant water flow from nature, from the water cycle, right? You take the dam away, all flows away, but you still got that constant flow of water. So there's still water in, water out. Uh, and that stored water has already been stored up, so there's no kind of like taking that water out of the in and out, the input and output. That's been done previously, and it's done in such a way that it's you've been able to store that water and not ruin the plains by the storing of the water. Okay. So that's the dam's now been blown apart. So you still got water coming from rainfall down into the river, and that river providing those canals. So arguably, you've still got the ability to irrigate. But here's possibly the problem. And I'm thinking out loud here. Is that what the dam allows you to do? The reservoir allows you to do is you've stored all that water over years and whatever, and it allows you to have a continual flow even during dry periods. So it might go like that, so down and then up and down and then up, but it allows you. It's almost like having a battery that, like, if you've got solar panels on your roof, right? You're you're able to store up excess energy into the battery, and then when it's nighttime, you use the battery to draw electricity from, and that gives you a constant flow throughout the whole day. Perhaps that's a good analogy for this water going, through that system over the course of a year. So maybe the canals will be affected by the dam getting blown because the river might not have the capacity during the dry months, where it would normally be they'd open the sluice gates from the reservoir during the dry months and then close it up more in the wet months, so on and so forth. So I don't know. Let me know what you think. It's just a lot of me waffling there. Holopristan, you got places that are absolutely devastated. Holopristan's underwater at Leshki, just awful. So tragic situation is unfolding. I read this morning, but I didn't do the whole lot. Is unfolding as the dam destruction by Russians has left many residents of Leshki and other riverside areas trapped in floodwaters. Urgent pleas for help from hundreds of people in the Telegram channel shows the dire need for immediate evacuations. Contrary to previous statements by the occupational Russian administration, the situation remains critical, and people are now attempting to organize their own evacuations using whatever means available to them. This is heartbreaking. I was able to obtain recent imagery of Oleshki, which confirms that large portions of residential areas have submerged under the water. And that's on the east bank, which is the Russian occupied bank. Now, where I was going with this is that today there is a lot of people. There are a lot of people saying, there are a lot of sources claiming that the Russians are shelling evacuation of Ukrainian citizens under duress and distress already in these flooded areas. The Russians are shelling them. It's just absolutely shocking. So Kherson, Russian forces are shelling Ukrainian rescuers attempting to evacuate citizens from the flooded homes. Confirmation of Russian shelling by Ukrainian rescue operations from the Times journalist Catherine Philp, who is on the ground in Kherson right now, and more shelling of rescue operations. In fact, we're going to look at some of this now. So here we got Russian forces reportedly shelled both civilians and a group of journalists in the heavily flooded Ostry district of Kherson city. Just a bit of a shocker. And Kherson is coming under serious Russian shelling with reports of multiple casualties at a school that was sheltering people who have lost homes in the flood. One volunteer helping evacuations came under fire and posted this video.
Охуеть! Блядь, это пизда, ты шо гонишь, братан? Давай, отодвинь меня. Давай, давай! Фу. Блядь, это пизда. Сейчас, бать, держитесь. Сука! Давай, давай, пацаны, валим отсюда. Бать, держитесь. Ты шо? Да ты шо? Так, давай, давай. Посмотрите, моих застрел, блядь, сука.
Let's go to the beginning again.
Давай, давай. Блядь, бате голову пробило. Охуеть.
Нет до тебя, давай, я текаю.
Сейчас, бать.
So I think, you know, it's just absolutely terrible to think that you've lost everything already, and then as you're being rescued, having lost everything in your life, somebody's trying to shell you. It's just crazy. Anyway, Zelensky visited the area this morning, and then several hours later, after been gone, you know, he visits areas quite quickly for security reasons. Obviously, Russians hit an evacuation point that Zelensky had visited just a few hours earlier. People at another evac spot scrambled for cover, and all evacuations in Kherson have now stopped. The streets are completely deserted. Panic at the evacuation point here. So. And you can hear the rumble of artillery hitting around the place. In Kherson, Russians are shelling heavily during the evacuation of the civilian population. This. Oh, I just ducked my head then. Just absolutely shocking. So yeah, and there's lots more footage as well. I could show you just more shelling preventing evacuation here, as you can see in the background there, so on and so forth. There's a whole heap of it. It's just terrible. Absolutely terrible. It's the worst kind of opportunism. Now you can understand that if there's a military opportunism to take there, but actually in this case that's not what's happening. It's trying to take out civilians, and that's inexcusable. Looking at pre-1950 maps of Dnipro, lots of good locations to throw pontoon bridges across a drained Kakhovka reservoir upstream from the Novokakhovka Dam. Russia really shot itself in the foot by blowing up the dam and by building 0 fortifications upstream, says Thomas Tyner. He's been quite positive about this. And actually, Michael Kaufman says it in a thread. I won't go into the whole thread now, but he says actually it won't have huge implications for the Ukrainian offensive. I mean, in the very short term around Kherson, yes, but essentially, aside from obviously the huge ecological humanitarian catastrophe, and the long-term economic implications, it won't have massive military consequences to that. Anyway, I showed you this image this morning. It's just endearing. This dog was saved by this guy, and now the dog is giving him a hug. Doesn't want him to go. It's just incredible. And then let's look at another bit of footage. So there's lots of animals being saved from the area. You can imagine animals will be scrabbling all over the place to try and get to safety. Here's a cat just clinging on, a little kitten clinging on to just a tiny little bit of brickwork, I guess, and being saved. I was listening to Ukraine the Latest podcast yesterday, where an animal charity is working overtime to try and save loads of animals. I've seen lots of things, lots of animal stuff, and it's quite endearing, but obviously there's a huge amount of ecological impact and death of many animals. And I showed you the fish that died, thousands and thousands of fish. Anyway, on an animal-related note, this, unfortunately, this fish doesn't survive, but this is pretty bizarre. Just look at that. Just look at the size of that fish that jumps out and then goes down the hatch there. It's insane. Incredible. Let's watch that again. Look, two big fish. Right, pops on down there. Pretty incredible. Anyway, they cooked the fish and had it for dinner. So there you go. It's maybe not such a happy ending for the fish, but an opportunist driver there. Perhaps I shouldn't have ended with that one. Let's go back to kittens. Anyway, let's go back to the nice dog picture. Thank you very much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate all of your support. Take care, and I will speak to you soon.